I just love meeting people with different perspectives and trying to synthesize things. And I also love standing back from things and trying to get a very big picture. What is fundamentally different about digital compared to the industrial age? And if we could discern that fundamental difference, then it might give us foresight into where the world's going. And quickly, we're literally saying new business models and technology platforms encourage us to procrastinate, to wait as long as possible before adding any value until there's an actual customer ready to buy or use that product or service or experience. The same thing that happens with every disruptive technology. Over time, it gets better and starts to incur into more and more opportunities and eventually into the core space.
Definitely, right? But proximity would reduce a lot of waste and in turn also help with climate change.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up, Karthik. This is one thing I'm most excited about, but it also illustrates that we can do it right or we can do it wrong with proximity. Proximate technologies, whether that's power generation and small scale solar and wind, or whether that's small scale manufacturing closer to demand with automated plants, 3D printing, et cetera. Having more of them in a network makes us much more adaptable and resilient.
So it's more like a network effect. So the bigger the network, the better it is.
The technology will get better and better. It'll get cheaper and cheaper, as it always does. And it'll start to transform entire supply chains. But that's going to take a lot of time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Driven by DCKAP podcast. I'm your host, Karthik Chidambaram, CEO of DCKAP. We make systems talk to each other for distributors. Today, I'm joined by Robert Wolcott, co-founder of Twin Global and adjunct professor of innovation at the Kellogg School of Management and at the Booth School of Business. Rob has recently authored and released a new book, Proximity, available on Amazon, where he explores radical shifts in production and service delivery driven by AI, 3D printing, and more. He's also the co-founder of an advisory firm, Clario, is a board member of 3 companies, and is a venture investor in over 30 companies, many of which are leading in the proximity revolution. Rob sees his mission as helping people envision the future and find their places within it. Rob, it's a pleasure to have you today. Thank you for joining the Driven by DCKAP podcast. I'm excited and looking forward to this conversation today.
Thanks, Karthik. Great to be here.
So to start off, Rob, you grew up in Chicago. I went to school there as well. I'm just curious. Love the Windy City. Tell us about your early days in Chicago and how did you end up at Kellogg and Booth? Also, how did you get into innovation and entrepreneurship?
Wow. Well, there's a long story there, but rather than boring all your listeners, I guess I'll go back to the pivotal moment. I actually remember the moment in my childhood when I decided I wanted to be in innovation. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. I barely knew what it meant. But I remember when I fell in love with the field. So we were living in Naperville at the time. And just to give people an idea how old I am, at that time, there were 24,000 people in Naperville. Of course, now it's like 150 or so. And I was in the school library because I was one of those kids who actually went to the library, on my own initiative. And I checked a book out called American Heritage Illustrated Book of Men and Their Inventions. It was a great big book with lots of text, but also pictures and diagrams and things. And it was a history of the Industrial Revolution. And I was hooked. And I checked it out as many times as I could. I then kept the book after they wouldn't let me check it out anymore. The librarian called my mom. I got in big trouble. So, I was so transfixed by technology and innovation and what happened during the Industrial Revolution. And at that moment, I told myself, I'm going to be in this innovation thing somehow. I don't know what it is. Engineer, entrepreneur, designer, investor, professor. I have no idea. Fast forward, I'm at Northwestern as an undergrad getting my history degree in European and Chinese history. History is my favorite subject. And I meet a new professor who just retired from a storied career in industry, Don Fry. He retired from CEO role at Bell and Howell, which was a Fortune 500 at the time. When he left, it was on top of the world. They had just transformed the company, driven through disruption before we even had a word for disruption, and gave his investors a 16-to-1 return from the time he started as CEO to the time he retired. I met him as an undergrad and I said, I want to work with this person. And so I had to, as you might guess, being a history major as an undergrad, after I graduated, I had to go to school at night to study math linear algebra, differential equations, physics, all the things you need in order to apply for an industrial engineering program when you started in history. And so then I did my master's PhD at Northwestern Industrial Engineering. And through that process, I met some faculty at Kellogg. They were on my doctoral committee. Somewhere along the line, one of them said, "Hey, would you like to teach a class, replace me for a session?" I said, "Yeah, all right." And it kind of went okay. I didn't screw it up too much. They asked me to come back. Then they asked me to create my own class. And it kind of just got out of hand. Because I guess the last thing I'll say is, as with many things in life, I didn't plan it. I didn't start thinking I was going to become a professor. In fact, I was never looking for a full-time academic role, and I've never been full-time in an academic role, always part-time. But Karthik, I love universities, but I also couldn't imagine being full-time because they also drive me nuts.
How old were you, Rob, when you went to the library, started reading the book on Industrial Revolution?
Well, that would be fourth grade. So what would that make me? 9, 10?
Wow.
Something like 9 or 10. I don't know. You can look up the math, but it was fourth grade.
That's very interesting. So at fourth grade, you kind of knew that you wanted to get into innovation, but you didn't know what the path was.
Exactly. That's it. Yep.
Cool. Very nice.
I just love, first of all, I love new things, new ideas, seeing them happen in the world. But even more than that, Karthik, I love meeting the people and learning about what drives them and how their mind works, the people who actually make this stuff happen. And you suffer a lot of slings and arrows as an innovator, an entrepreneur, whether you're an independent entrepreneur or you're at a big company or a government agency, whatever it is. If you're trying to do new things, you're going to face a lot of resistance. And the people that see a vision and they iterate on it and they get up every day and they really try to make it happen, I'm a huge fan.
You've had a very interesting and a great career. You went to big schools. But after your fourth grade, were you always smart? I'm just curious. Or did you also have some?
Well, that begs the question, Karthik, if I'm even smart now. So I'll let other people decide that. I'll answer that in a different way. I've always been curious. I have a tendency when I see something or hear something that's interesting to me, I really want to understand what's going on. And I just love meeting people with different perspectives and trying to synthesize things. And I also love standing back from things and trying to get a very big picture, whether that's the overall systemic factors that are driving people to make decisions, say within an organization, or looking out to the future, trying to build foresight as to where things might go. And in order to do that, I think most of us get very focused on the weeds. And it's not just a forest we're looking at. We're actually looking at an entire planet, and later this century, of course, beyond the planet. But so I really like standing back, trying to find a few essential points that we can depend upon and extrapolate them out in various ways to discover where things might go in the future. So that's kind of my natural act, I guess.
You authored and released a new book, Proximity. Tell us about it. What is Proximity?
Great. So yeah, in fact, Karthik, Proximity is launching right about now from Columbia University Press. My co-author, Kaihan Krippendorf, and I, during COVID, we were talking about this idea. And I started developing the idea in 2014. And what happened was I was, like many of your listeners, I had been going to a lot of tech conferences. And I don't know if any of your listeners are old enough to remember, years and years ago, but there was about a decade period where every speaker at tech conferences had one slide. Everybody had the same slide, which was Moore's Law. Now, by the way, big fan of Moore's Law, super predictive for quite a long time, really important. But you know what? After the 174th time you're seeing the Moore's Law slide, you probably don't need to see it again. So I was staring at the same Moore's Law slide and thinking we must be able to have further insight into what's next. And so I asked a question inside myself. I said, what is fundamentally different regarding digital? And I mean all kinds of digital. So it could be 3D printing, could be rooftop solar, certainly mobile apps, artificial intelligence, anything digitally enabled. What is fundamentally different about digital compared to the industrial age? And if we could discern that fundamental difference, then it might give us foresight into where the world's going. And quickly, what I realized was, and this won't shock your listeners, but it's the implication of it that no one has really noticed. The first part is digital allows us to compress capabilities of all sorts into smaller and smaller packages and distribute them all over the economy, ever closer to each moment in time and space. So it could be a mobile app on your mobile device, but it could also be a 3D printing machine. It could be rooftop solar power generation, smaller and smaller packages. More recently, large language models. Now you're seeing small language models, or as Apple calls them, efficient language models, because they need their own term for everything. So you take digital and you compress capabilities into small packages, distribute them all over. And therefore, the implication is, and this is proximity, digital pushes the creation of value, all sorts of value, products, services, experiences. Digital pushes the creation of value ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space. Now, when I first started talking about this, I think 2015 was the first time at an economist conference, people thought I meant better supply chain management. And I love that. Everybody loves better supply chain management. That's a great thing. But that's a really small part of what we're saying. We're literally saying new business models and technology platforms that encourage us to procrastinate, to wait as long as possible before adding any value until there's an actual customer ready to buy or use that product or service or experience. And that's proximity. And it's happening in every industry and will do so. This is the direction of change for the rest of our careers across every industry. In the book, Karthik, we talk about how we work, how we eat, how we create and produce, how we prevent and cure, how we power, and how we defend. And in the final chapter, we talk about virtual reality and space, which are both 100% proximate. We can talk more about that if you like. So that's proximity, pushing all value creation ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space.
Very interesting. I mean, I love how you relate this to digital, and it's easy to understand in terms of, hey, let's say if I want to open my app, it's there. I need it and it's there. And but how does this work, right? So when it comes to proximity in manufacturing, you also need the raw material, right? So I mean, not everything is available close to where you live. So then how would that work?
Yeah, so a lot of answers to that question. In some spaces, we're already 100% proximate. So if you think about digital things like Netflix, for instance, the provision of video content is already proximate. You can watch it anywhere on any device at any moment. The production of the content, though, happens months, maybe even years in advance. But that's starting to shift because of AI, like video apps like Sora. It's still early. It's not great for most things, but where will it be in 10 years? So it's shifting that direction. But you've asked correctly about physical products. And physical products, they operate differently than fully digitalized products. But the more that we can instantiate into digital, the closer and closer to demand we can actually become with physical products. So I'll give you an example. In their annual report for 2022, Ford Motor Company reported that they had made 200,000 parts for automotive via 3D printing. Now, this was not worth playing with it. This is a fun thing in our lab. This is stuff they're using, and they're using it in order to cover critical supply chain stockouts, to cover MRO. I don't really need 100 copies of that thing in inventory. What I really need is just one, exactly where and when I need it. And some of those MRO replacement parts are much better, much more economically when you do the overall math, to produce one copy on a 3D printer where it's needed. And so, to be clear, Karthik, there are lots of things where 3D printing is not economical. It doesn't yet work. It's not good enough. People have lost a lot of money. But what's happening? The same thing that happens with every disruptive technology. Over time, it gets better and better and starts to incur into more and more opportunities and eventually into the core space. So in the book, we talk about a lot of examples of transformative models where you're actually producing the product, physical products, coterminous with the actual demand. And you still need the raw materials. That's true. So we'll still have supply chains, but they'll be closer and closer to the actual, not just the parts or the components, but closer and closer over time, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, closer and closer to that raw material space. I'll give you a tangible example. One of my favorite examples from the book, actually. Dr. Jeffrey Ling, one of my heroes, was a medical doctor for the Army. He practices medicines at Johns Hopkins now, but he had 6 tours of duty in the Middle East, and they kept running out of generic drugs. Now, it's not a shock that you're going to run out of generic drugs in a war zone. It's a war zone, after all. But what Dr. Ling shared with me that I didn't know is we run out of generic drugs at hospitals and clinics all over the United States all the time. And this is every day. I'm not talking about under patent sort of ethical pharmaceuticals under patent. I'm talking about generic drugs. All of our generic drugs are made overseas, mostly China, India. And so we have very little control over access to those drugs. And it's a big supply chain challenge. So Dr. Ling said, wait a minute. Almost all these generic drugs are organic. They're made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So if I had the right equipment, I could make the drug right here. Give me a chemistry set. So he came back to the US. He got a big grant from DARPA at the Department of Defense. They worked with a team from MIT, and they solved it. The company today is called Demand Pharmaceuticals. You can look it up. The military is using the technology in small scale now, and it's getting better. The FDA has already confirmed that the drugs that come out of On-Demand Pharmaceuticals equipment are exactly the same as you get at the pharmacy. No difference. Now, what does this mean? Well, we have a piece of equipment the size of a large refrigerator, and it sits there doing absolutely nothing. It has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in it. Now, there are some APIs, intermediates, for all of you, your fans who love pharmaceuticals. Set that aside. Let's make this simpler. It basically has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in it. Now, you type in, I need 1,000 doses of atropine. Hours later, out comes 1,000 doses of atropine, exactly the same as you get at the pharmacy. Or 300 doses of ciprofloxacin. Hours later, out come 300 doses of Cipro. Now, let's think about this from a supply chain perspective. Right now, the United States has millions of doses of Cipro in strategic reserve in case of a public health emergency. And many governments do. It has a shelf life of about 3 years. So every 3 years, they throw out all the pills and they make new pills. Now, contrast that traditional model with the on-demand pharmaceuticals model. In this equipment is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Karthik, I have a question for you. What is the shelf life of carbon?
Well,
yep, that's right. Forever. Now, when you start to do the math and you compare, I have a shelf life product, finished product. I don't know if I've made enough or too much, right? Or not enough. On the other hand, I have something sitting there with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in it, waiting for somebody to need something, and then I produce it. You see how dramatically different proximate models are from the past. And in some spaces, it's happening really fast, like in artificial intelligence, large language models. In other spaces, it's going to take quite a lot of time, maybe even decades in some cases. But this is the new direction in which every industry is going the rest of our careers.
I love this. How far along do you think we are, in terms of on-demand pharmacy? Do you think, it's going to happen? You talked about maybe a few decades, right? So, is it going to be a few decades, or, are we close enough?
Well, you ask an important question. And as an investor, and I'm not an investor in on-demand pharmaceuticals, I love Dr. Ling. I love the concept. It's just not a space that I would invest in. But it's hard to say with each individual company, because even if they've got great tech, great leadership, you just never know. But what's compelling, Karthik, is about on-demand, for instance, is that the FDA has already signed off that these drugs coming out are the same as you get from a massive factory thousands of miles away. Second, they have their first commercial implementation right now in Tupelo, Mississippi. So on-demand work with a health system in Tupelo, very underserved, chronically stocking out of critical drugs. They chose 6 injectable drugs. So it's healthcare after all. We have to start slowly. We have to get it right because people's lives are on the line. So they chose 6 injectable drugs as their pilot. They installed the equipment in Tupelo at this health system. And since they switched it on in January, they've had 0 stockouts of these 6 injectable drugs. That is the first time in the history of this health system that they've had 0 stockouts of these drugs. So I can't pretend in the specific case to say how long it's going to take. But what we do know is that it's working. And there'll be lots of examples in a lot of other environments where, I mentioned Ford Motor and other major automakers are all using 3D printing for more and more aspects of what they're doing. It's still vanishingly small, part of their overall manufacturing value chain. But it starts to incur and become better and better, and they'll discover there's a big learning curve for all these things. So our expectation, we don't make date predictions, but our expectation is for physical products and physical supply chains, the next couple of years, you're not going to see that much difference. You're going to see things happening at the margins, some compelling stuff. But 10 years, 20 years from now will be dramatically different. And I could give examples from other industries if you like.
Well, definitely, right? So, but proximity would also, would reduce a lot of waste and in turn also help with climate change.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up, Karthik. This is one thing I'm most excited about, but it also illustrates that we can do it right or we can do it wrong. And I'll give you a current example. Company like, I think it's Shein or Shine, I don't know, I'm not a fashionista. Temu, think about what they're doing. They're satisfying the demand, the desire of human beings to have whatever they want, whenever they want it. And so that's the interesting thing about proximity. A little subtitle that we like to use for proximity is anything, anywhere, anytime. And so we all know the Temu model. You can order that one sweater. It'll be produced at a factory in China. Then they'll put it on a cargo jet and fly it to you in Omaha, Nebraska. I mean, boy, what could be better? But now, incidentally, there's a peculiarity of the trade tariff world called de minimis, which is why they are absolved from paying, at least for now, from paying trade tariffs for those small shipments, but set that aside. So what is Temu doing? Temu is satisfying proximity in the sense that they're giving consumers huge choice. They'll make that one thing to order for them thousands of miles away. They put it on a cargo jet to get it to me fast, but it's destroying the environment. I mean, it's just a simple fact. The more sweaters we put on 777 cargo jets ain't such a great thing. And if you look at the data, a huge percentage of cargo air traffic between Asia and the United States right now is as a result of these fast fashion companies. So this shows the enormous demand humans have for whatever they want, wherever, whenever they want it. And we can use 20th century technology like Temu is to achieve part of that, the cargo jet. Or we can use 21st century technology to do it in a much more sustainable way, like on-demand pharmaceuticals, like Interstellar Lab in the plant-derived ingredients space, like Create Me in the textile space we talk about in the book. These are new platforms, new technologies that actually radically decrease waste by not adding value until there's an actual customer ready to buy.
So what do you think is the role of government in proximity? What do you think they should be doing across the world?
Oh, that's a great question. So in a general sense, I'm a fan of providing the environment within which companies, investors, markets can do their magic because they tend to be a lot better at allocating resources. There are exceptions to that. Very long-term R&D initiatives. Honestly, there are lots of data from history that the very long-term significant R&D initiatives either have to have government or a monopoly like AT&T was many years ago to invest that kind of money over that kind of time. But overall, I tend to be more for, free market in terms of driving that. But today, with challenges we're facing with geopolitics, with extreme climate events around the world, governments should use the concept of proximity to build far more resilience, sustainability, and adaptability. I'll give you an example. It is essential that we build more semiconductor capacity and that we have more of it here at home. It's a strategic imperative for lots of reasons many of your listeners already know. But interestingly, everybody was all excited about Sam Altman trying to raise $7 trillion to build semiconductor fabricators around the fab plants around the world. And first of all, he's not going to raise $7 trillion. I'll just tell you that now. I mean, take the two largest companies in human history by market cap, add them up, and it's not $7 trillion. Okay, so he's not going to raise $7 trillion. Now, he is going to raise a lot of money for chip fabs, and so he's playing a very important role. But what most people miss the wisdom of what he's doing. They think, oh, Sam wants more chip supply, greater chip supply. That is true. But there's another part to his mission, which he wants a network of chip fabs around the world, not just more capacity in Taiwan and Arizona. He wants a network of chip fabs closer to demand so we can be far more responsive and also protect global supply chains, protect our national interests if there are geopolitical challenges. And by the way, Karthik, this was a fundamental insight that led to the internet. Back in I think the 60s, the Department of Defense posed a challenge. And the challenge was, how do we have a computer communications any sort of communications network that can survive and continue operating through a nuclear attack? That became the internet. Well, what was it about the internet? Well, I have multiple nodes all over the place connected. And if some of the nodes are knocked out, it redirects to other nodes and adds more adaptability. It's the same thing with proximity. Proximate technologies, whether that's power generation in small scale solar and wind, or whether that's small scale manufacturing closer to demand with automated plants, 3D printing, et cetera. Having more of them in a network makes us much more adaptable and resilient, as opposed to the old industrial age model where we have massive plants that are sitting ducks in the case of a geopolitical challenge.
So it's more like a network effect. So the bigger the network, the better it is.
Yeah, it can be more resilient. And the good news, so if we could do that, we could have done this 20 years ago, but it would have been way too expensive. It would have been horribly uncompetitive. But the exciting fact, Karthik, is that digital technologies allow us to do things we could never have done before. That's what we have to start to recognize. We have to ask, what can these technology allow us to do that we could never have done before? And the guiding light is bringing the production and provision of value ever closer to the moment of actual demand. And those moments, of course, are all over the world at any moment where your customer, your consumer, your client might be located in time and space. And digital allows us to do that. And so we can have a far more resilient, adaptable system than the old hardwired industrial age supply chain.
At DCKAP, we work with a lot of manufacturers and distributors. So what do you think they can be doing, right? So in terms of what baby steps or practical things they can be doing to implement proximity in their business?
That is an excellent question. And I'm actually quite excited about the opportunity for manufacturers, also distributors, because there's one thing I imagine all of your clients already have some handle on. If you look across all the components, parts, inputs, et cetera, to what you create and provide for your customers and clients, where are the highest risks? Where are the ones where you have challenges with stockouts from time to time and you've got huge inventory because you need to make sure you've got it ready to go, and there's a cost? Where are the ones where it works great? You get the supply you need, you're doing just in time, but you know what? If there's a huge climate event and the factory in Thailand is destroyed and there are only 2 factories you're sourcing from, you're in some trouble. So you go through all of the aspects of components, inputs in your supply chain, and ask yourself, what are the risk factors for each individual piece? What are the highest risks, the ones that we face all the time, or the ones that we could face in sort of a black swan event? After you've done that assessment, now take the highest risk ones, the highest value ones, and say, do an exercise. What if we could produce that thing or provide that thing? So provision, when we say provision, we mean like sales, service, support, that sort of thing. Producing is producing. What if we could produce and or provide that thing at the exact moment of demand? How would the world look? And what technologies out there might allow us to do it? I'll give you a tangible example. And it's a company that I have invested in. It's doing extraordinarily well. And it really is changing the game. It's called Interstellar Lab. My good friend Barbara Belvisi is a French plant scientist, and she was then a venture capitalist. And in 2018, she called me and she said, Rob, I would like to figure out how to grow food on Mars. And I said, what? She said, grow food on Mars. I said, it sounds like you said grow food on Mars. I said, yes, it's what I said. And she said, would you like to invest? And I said, of course not. I'm not a billionaire. I don't have a 60-year time horizon. She laughed because she knew that wasn't my profile. But she had just gotten a big grant from NASA and a big grant from the ESA. And that work continues. They've made a ton of progress to figure out how to have systems to allow us to grow food on Mars or in spaceships. Now, Barbara's also smart enough to know she needs a real business. This isn't just a science project. So she and her team, they're located just outside Paris. She and her team made a list of all of the ingredients derived from plants, the high value, low volume ingredients derived from plants. And if you think about what industries need, high value, very low volume, very high value ingredients derived from plants. What are they? They're cosmetics, skincare, fragrances, some biotech as well. All these are led from Paris, right? So it's a perfect synchronicity. And so she reached out to ingredients companies, cosmetics companies. What she has is, you can look it up online, Interstellar Lab. They have this pod that you can walk into. It's a little bigger, twice the size of this room that I'm sitting in. And they grow plants in ideal atmosphere, customized for each individual plant. And biggest client right now, so they have revenues, they're growing like mad. Their biggest client is Robertech, the largest ingredients company in the world. They just announced in January a contract with L'Oreal. L'Oreal is installing a bunch of her pods in their manufacturing plants. Barbara's company monitors and manages those pods remotely, collects all the data for all the growing conditions for each individual plant, the yields, et cetera. And she calls it hardware as a service. Now, here's what's exciting. L'Oreal can, for specific high value, high risk ingredients, things they really need, they can grow exactly the plants where and when they need them. And I'll give you a tangible example. There's a plant called Vetiver. It grows in Indonesia and India. And currently the way they harvest is they rip the plant out of the ground, they chop the roots off, and they have to start over again. With her system, they grow Vetiver in this pod. It's an aeroponic system. So they pick the platform up, they clip a little bit of the roots off, they put it back down, the plant continues to grow. The yield for the ingredient in this pod compared to the wild is 1,000% higher, and it's improving every day. Now, what does this mean for L'Oreal? They have exactly how much of that ingredient they need, where and when they need it, with zero supply chain risk worldwide. They don't care for that ingredient. They don't care about what's happening in the Red Sea. They don't care about whether there's a conflict on some island in Indonesia. They're completely absolved. That's an example of taking proximity technology and business model, digitally enabling, putting it in your supply chain, and giving you enormous value for high risk things. Now, over time, Karthik, we're going to find more and more examples of this. The technology will get better and better. It'll get cheaper and cheaper, as it always does. And it'll start to transform entire supply chains. But that's going to take a lot of time.
But that would mean the plant is not naturally growing, right? So it's kind of...
That's true.
Yeah. But is that okay?
That's true. It is naturally growing in the pod. And by the way, because of her customers, this is not a statement for or against GMOs, but because of her customers and their requirements, none of these plants are GMO. They're selectively bred, like we've been doing for thousands of years, but they're actually the plants growing in far better optimized conditions than they would find, say, on an island in Indonesia.
And what is GMO?
Oh, genetically modified organisms.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother can of worms. Or modified worms, I guess, genetically engineered worms that we probably don't have time to open up right now.
So you have invested in a lot of companies. You've invested in over 30 companies. Share with us some investment advice.
Investment advice. Well, I tell all my students at Kellogg and Booth, if you take any of my investment advice, you will lose all of your money. I just want them to know that, if they make an investment and I'm wrong, they're adults, right? So, but fortunately, I have had some success in this. It's very different to talk about public markets than it is to talk about private investments in, say, startups or venture funds. I guess one guideline I have now is any venture investment I make, I have to see how they're leading the proximity revolution. And two, I really want to see that they're doing something that would be difficult for the existing incumbents to do on their own. Maybe they could do it, but it would directly conflict with their existing infrastructure, their existing business models. Then I start to be interested. Second, there are some spaces that I don't touch myself. I don't invest in biotech, for instance. I love biotech. I'm super interested. I don't feel I have the expertise, the focused expertise to be good in that. So I avoid it. Somewhere in the middle, though, would be like digital health. I have great interest in that and quite a few investments, but I rely on experts. As an LP, I'm an LP in a couple of venture funds that focus on digital health. I do not make digital health related investments myself. Why is that? Not because I can't understand what the companies are trying to do. Of course, you can understand if you pay attention, but because the healthcare industry ecosystem in the United States is so incredibly complex and non-obvious, and the dynamics are peculiar. So I rely, for instance, in Chicago on 7Wire Ventures, fabulous operators who became venture capitalists. They're not finance people by background. They build companies. They founded Livongo before the COVID crisis. And of course, you might know that was publicly traded. It shot through the roof and then was acquired by Teladoc for $19 billion, the largest in history at the time in the digital health space. But I rely on the team at 7Wire because they know healthcare, they know digital, they know the industry, they know how it works. And I put my trust in them as an LP, a limited partner. In some other cases, I'll make direct investments very early, but I tend to avoid healthcare on my own, for instance.
And how do you invest your personal money?
Well, sometimes directly in private spaces, sometimes very early. In fact, I told my wife soon after we were married, we're looking at doing some angel investment, and she comes from a finance background. So she's very sharp, really knows her stuff, great with a spreadsheet. And I said, honey, I'm in this innovation space. We're going to start doing some angel investing. Here's what you have to know. It's very early. These companies don't have any revenue. They think they know what they're going to do, but whatever they're doing today is not what they're going to be doing in 3 years. That's just the way it is. And so here's the thing. I promise to you, I'm never going to touch our retirement money. If we have kids, I'm never touching the college fund, right? We're never going to lose our house. But here's the thing. When we make an angel investment, very earliest of early stages, just assume you've lost all the money right up front, and then you're going to sleep well. And she said, oh, okay, Rob. Yeah, I get that. So why would we do it? But I mean, it's a fun story, but it is accurate. If you're going to be in the earliest stages of investment, you've got to be able to lose a lot of that, because your hit rate's going to be, 2, 3, 4 of those out of 10 will make money that covers the rest of the failures. And that is actually how it's worked out. We've had a few really big successes and a couple of dismal failures. But Karthik, if you're going to get into this game, one piece of advice I got very early, before I even started angel investing, a couple of successful angel investors told me, don't even get into this unless you see a path over the next, 5 or 7 years to get to at least 10 and hopefully 20 investments in early stage companies, because you must build yourself into a portfolio. And now today, of course, I have investments in stage B and C and D and later stage, mid stage, and a lot of publicly traded companies. I guess the last thing I'll say is, if you get into this game, hopefully you also have some much more dependable investments. You're diversified. You've got, some equity in a company like Costco, which is just an absolute star and pretty dependable. And then you've got some really safe money you can't afford to lose. So I'm not the right person to give financial advice. You get this from your financial advisor. But if you're going to dip your toe into very earliest stages of business, it's nothing like investing in the stock market.
No, totally. I love the advice of, hey, don't touch the retirement funds, don't touch the
Right.
college education funds. Yeah, it makes a lot of
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
So Rob, on this podcast, we interview a lot of leaders, and one question we ask them is, what is the question they would like to ask the next guest we interview? We recently interviewed Clint Oram. He's the co-founder of Sugar CRM, one of the leaders and the pioneers in the CRM space. And the question he wanted to ask is, how can companies trigger growth from within? What should they be investing in? Let's say I'm really looking to grow. Where should I invest?
Wow, it's interesting he asked that. He didn't know that you were interviewing me, right?
He didn't know.
Well, here's an interesting kismet. My first book, 2009, is called Grow From Within. So if you want my answer to that question, look up the book Grow From Within. You can still get it on Amazon. That's a long answer to that question, how to generate growth from within. But I think one piece of advice I give people all the time is we have to ask better questions. We have to pose better challenges. The essence innovation strategy is to have a portfolio of options on the future. It's just like your financial portfolio. When you face uncertainty, you've got to make sure you have portfolio optionality. And one of the ways to build that is to make sure you're exploring broadly. If you only look within your existing industry and existing supply chain with your existing customers and suppliers, you're going to miss really important stuff, opportunities and threats. And so I think we have to become a lot better at posing exploratory challenges. What do I mean by that? There are directives like, hey, we should build a rooftop solar business. Okay. That could be the best decision in the history of your company, but that's a directive. You've already decided the answer. Let's go build it. An exploratory challenge is I'm not really sure what I'm going to find, but I hypothesize that if we put some smart people to do some exploring in this particular area, we're liable to find some valuable stuff. We need to do more of that. And the great news, Karthik, about those kinds of exercises is they don't cost much at all. It's just some time and attention. Our most limited resource is the attention of our best people. But you also want to get some of your best people looking in these new spaces because they'll find things before they're a threat. They'll find things when they are an opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the book recommendation as well. So that's very helpful. So what question would you like to ask the next guest we interview, Rob?
By the way, Karthik, I love that question. It's really neat to generate serendipity. I would like to ask whoever your next interviewee is, what's a headline you would love to see 5 years from now? And it can be about anything, something important to you. Could be business, could be personal, could be geopolitics, could be really anything. What is a headline you would love to see 5 years from now and why?
I love that question. So Rob, my last question to you is you're a professor, you read a lot, you're an investor, entrepreneur, you wear multiple hats. How do you keep yourself updated and what book are you reading right now?
Oh, great. Well, in terms of updated, as you might guess, I know a lot about a lot of different technologies and industries, but I'm not the number one expert on any specific technology or industry. So what I love to do is find people who are super experts in specific technology areas or industries and stay connected with them. And when it's important, like for instance, AI, I have a couple of daily newsletter. They're not even newsletter, there's emails. Here's stuff going on. And I glance at them every day. And when I see something interesting, I'll dig in. But I rely on individual people who really know their stuff, who love their stuff, who love to share what they're seeing. I rely on them. And then if I need specific advice or support for something I'm working on, then I reach out to them and say, hey, can we have a chat? In terms of the book I'm reading right now, it's called World on the Brink by Dmitry Alperovich. Dmitry is the founding CTO of CrowdStrike, the cybersecurity company. By the way, he's one of my go-to people for cybersecurity. Nobody knows more than Dmitry does. And he's shifted his focus much more broadly to look at the relationship between the United States and China in particular, but global geopolitics in general, but United States and China specifically. And he offers some really powerful advice and some challenging questions for all of us to consider, especially, by the way, if we're reliant on global supply chains. So I'm a big shout out to Dmitry and World on the Brink.
Thank you, Rob. So I'm actually reading a book on Swami Vivekananda. So he was in Chicago as well. Some of his learnings and some of his speeches, it's a small little book. That's what I'm reading.
What's the book?
Swami Vivekananda. It's just his speeches. I'm just reading his speeches.
Oh, interesting.
Are you familiar with him or?
No, what's give me an example.
He's like a guru, right? So he talks about, let me get it for you. Give me 1 second. This is what I'm trying to read right now, so his address. So he was in Chicago. So his Indian.
Yeah, and that's the Art Institute of Chicago, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he gave some speeches in Chicago. I'm just trying to read, I just got this, very little read. So yeah, this is what I'm reading.
When was he around? How many years ago?
Well, he was born in 1863.
Wow.
He died when he was 39, at 19.
I have heard of him, Vivekananda.
Yeah, that's right.
I need to look him up again and make sure I understand what that was a fascinating period too. Many people don't know this, but in 1893, Chicago was the fastest growing city in the world.
Wow.
That's when we had the Columbian Exposition in Chicago. And basically at that time, Chicago was what later, like you think of Shanghai, a decade or two ago. Chicago was that city. It isn't now. It's still a fantastic city. I love Chicago very much. But at that time, it was creating the future, full stop. And that would be about the time, Vivekananda came in the early 20th century, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that Chicago was the fastest growing city at that
in 1893. Yeah, when it hosted the Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, Rob, I just want to thank you. I mean, I learned a lot about proximity, and congratulations on your new book. It offers a lot of value, and the book is also available on Amazon, Proximity. So, thank you so much for joining the Driven by DCKAP podcast. Thanks for telling us about proximity and also walking us through the future. Enjoyed chatting with you, and it's been great. Thank you again for joining Driven by DCKAP.
Thanks, Karthik. And if anyone wants to reach out, I'm always available on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. Just mention that we met on the DCKAP podcast.
Yeah, mention that you met on the DCKAP podcast. That's a bonus for all of you. Thank you, Rob, and nice chatting.
Thanks, Karthik.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Driven Podcast. Check out our other episodes for more and subscribe to be the first to access every new episode.